Good evening. Welcome to the October 10th Village Board Work Session. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's remove
Alrighty. Oh, I was waiting for attendance, but it's a work session. That's not happening tonight. So, please, somebody say you have announcements because I have so many. Does anybody else have announcements?
Are you doing Sandy Galiff's women?
That's not even on my list, so you can do that one.
Well, somebody else go because now I have to find it.
I'm good.
Okay. I'll do some recaps of things, and then you can interject that when we get to the calendar items. So there were a couple of things actually that happened today that I wanted to fill everyone at the table and anybody else listening about. Today was annually Westchester County invites municipal officials to come to a disaster response and recovery training. And this year we really focused on the recovery aspect of it as opposed to the immediate life safety response. We have a lot of experience with the immediate response when trees are down, when roads end up being closed, when people have power outages. What we talked about today was what if something catastrophic happened and we had a prolonged period of time with a significant amount of people who were either without power or in some way the schools were closed for a prolonged period of time. So it was a very valuable discussion. I'll commit some of my observations and my takeaways from that to writing to share with staff, particularly with Karen, because our village manager is actually our emergency manager in situations like that. So I'll fill you in. There was one particularly valuable thing, but what comes down to it as a call for action for community members, anybody who watching this is not the one I'm necessarily talking to, but when there is an emergency and you need to get information from the local government, we need to know what is the best way for us to communicate with you. Email works for a lot of people. If you're an email person and you're not already getting 1 or 2 emails a week from the village, please go to the village website and subscribe. If you are on social media, please make sure that you are following the police department, the village page. I have a page as well, and we all cross-share information. And when there is an emergency and people are responding, that's a very quick way to get information out. And there's also Nixle, which is a text. If you're not already signed up for Nixle, please sign up. We don't use that as much as some communities do, but if there is snow emergencies or things of that nature, those will always be put out by Nixle as well. So we're always looking for better and more ways to communicate with people, but that's sort of what happens in the immediate response. If there's prolonged response, then we'll communicate with you to let you know. You can anticipate hearing from us in this way at this time so that there's always an available pathway for information for folks. Also, I'm wearing this cute little blue button today because today is Organ Donor Day, and Live New York, Live On New York has been partnering with Ossining for the last few years, and in fact, Ossining won an award for the most folks who had signed up during these campaigns in recent years. So today is Organ Donor Day, and I was a part of a Team Ossining organ donor group today. The town of Ossining spearheads this effort for us from their office every year, so thank you very much to Supervisor Levenberg and Victoria Caffarelli in her office for organizing us. And Allie was there, who is the person from longlivenewyork.org. And if you are not yet an organ donor, if you want to help boost Ossining's numbers for today, for our Organ Donor Day, not exactly a competition, more just an awareness. But we have one in the past, I will say. It'd be nice if we can continue our streak. You go to registerme.org and you can register right now, today. It's not too late to be part of today's organ donor drive. If you're already an organ donor, then you made that decision maybe with a lot of thought, maybe just when you were getting your license renewed and you checked the box and said, yeah, that's fine. But if you're an organ donor, then you potentially could save 8 lives, and that is a pretty powerful legacy for anyone. And we're a community that likes to help our neighbors and goes out of our way to help each other and volunteer. And this is, the last thing you can do to help your neighbors or somebody else is save their life. That's a pretty powerful thing to do. So I am an organ donor. All of us who are at the conference, the press conference today, were an organ donor. I'm not going to put anybody here on the spot, but I know many of us in this room are organ donors. I confirmed with Manny that he is. It means you have a little heart on your driver's license is one way of knowing that you're an organ donor. Did you find your
Yeah, I
announcement?
did.
Okay, go for it, because then I'll get my little announcements teed up.
Okay. This is sort of neat, so I just want to bring it to people's attention. Our very own Assemblywoman Gallup is hosting an event to celebrate the 100th year anniversary of women's rights to vote at the Ossining Historical Society Saturday, October 19th, 1 p.m. The rain date is Sunday, October 20th. You can contact our office, but no reservation required. There'll be some people reading some really interesting works related to, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. And Sandy will also talk about a history of the suffrage movement. So it's not for women only, people. It's for everybody. Really interesting stuff. You can call our office if you need to. Was it?
All right. I actually, because of Sandy's event, it was the first time I'd ever read the Declaration of Sentiments, but I was moved to do it because I felt like I'm showing up. I should know what the heck this really amazing document is
Right.
that led to women's suffrage. So it was very interesting. Um, there are a number of things happening in the next few weeks. I don't have a flyer for this one, so just get your calendar out. And we've talked about it before, but the Forest O Fears, or the Haunting at Cedar Lane. If you go to forestofears.org, you can get your tickets for the weekends of they're Friday and Saturday, October 18th and 19th, and October 25th and 26th. And you can go ahead and buy them right online, and you can get all the information on that website. And it's happening at the town Cedar Lane Park. Actually happening before that, October 17th, Thursday, October 17th at 6:30. Join the Ossining documentary and discussion series for this month's offering. It is called Who is Diane Cristal? It is a documentary, of course, really, really powerful and moving story about migrants who come to this country and are simply lost, meaning that they die in the desert and nobody even knows who they are. And this story looks at one person's body, and it said Diane Cristal in a tattoo on his body, which is how they tracked down and learned his story. And so by investigating this individual story, you will learn quite a lot about the experience of migrants so desperate to come to our country that they would subject themselves to this horrible conditions. On a lighter note, please join us for a conversation immediately after that with a couple of really compelling panelists. You can learn more about it at ossiningdocumentaries.org. As always, it is free to the public, and again, it starts at 6:30 at the Ossining Public Library on October 17th. On October 19th at Henry Gordine Park, please join us for the Big Oss Barbecue. It is happening from 12 to 6 p.m. It is exclusively food purveyors from Ossining. You'll see a lot of familiar faces. There are, folks that you know, like First Village will be there, and Sing Sing Kilbury will be there with beverages, but the food options that I'm aware of are Craven Jamaican, Malike will be there, Ahi Limo, there's going to be a pizza place, Brothers Fish and Chips, so it's going to be a really terrific mix, and they are each creating a dish that they are preparing on an open flame. Oh, and vegans, Good Choice Kitchen is even there doing some, I don't know how you do barbecue vegan, but they're doing it. So barbecue is a very broad interpretation. So please join us from noon to 6 at Henry Gordine Park on October 19th. Madam Manager.
I do not have any direct announcements, but I will now turn over our discussion on methods for honorary street renaming on a go-forward basis, including the renaming of the corner of Croton Avenue and Sherman Place after Jim Drohan's father, who worked there as a crossing guard. Corporation Counsel.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, members of the board. You've all been provided with the report from village historian Dana White with regard to Jim Drohan Sr., regarding his residency in Ossining, his long period as a volunteer firefighter, his working at the pile down at on 9/11, and his work as a crossing guard. I think Dana has set forth really the many, many things that Mr. Drohan did both for Ossining as well as for the public at large. What our policy is, or this would be our first under our new policy, is that the board can then notice a public hearing with regard to having the street renaming. That public hearing, if the board agrees, we could have a resolution next week to notice it for the 6th of November. And at that point, following the public hearing, the board would vote on whether to grant or deny the application. This does appear to be an application that is worthy of this board's consideration.
Thank you. I trust everybody had an opportunity to read the report. I spoke only briefly with Dana, and she kind of gave me a heads up on what would be in the report. And she feels like her job is to do some research and present it to us. She's not making a recommendation one way or the other, understanding that that's our responsibility. It's interesting for us to undertake a whole new policy, a whole new procedure, because in the past it's been sort of ad hoc when and how and why we've ever named streets, and we've done a couple during our tenure here, and there were others. I actually live on Peter Falk Place, and I have no idea what the process was to make that happen, and whatever board was there at the time undertook the process that they thought was appropriate, and I'm really pleased that we have implemented a process that can be somewhat provide some consistency, some continuity, and a pathway for people who have an interest in having a street named to be able to apply for it, regardless of who our successors are. That said, this is sort of our test case. We just passed it, so we'll see how this works out. And if we think we need to do it any differently, then we can always amend the policy going forward. But anybody have any thoughts about this particular application?
No, I think it was just the report that Dana provided us is just incredible. Like just a little bit of history of who this person was and still is as part of our community. It's just incredible to learn more in details. Obviously, just a couple of pages doesn't tell you the whole story, but it gives you a lot of feedback and a lot of things that you just don't think this person had accomplished in his life. So I'm definitely grateful to put this for next week's resolution.
My only thought on this was that we have a couple of named, one after a reverend, one after a past chief. It would be cool when we make these signs in house, right?
Yes.
The street sign. It'd be nice to put like a red star or something on the what? No.
No, this the ones that was used for the chief and the reverend were actually custom made because they're in the downtown, so they're very specific look. So,
but this is
but
not
this
an
one
historic
is not a
district, so it
district
probably would
district,
be
so
done
it could
in-house.
be.
Yeah.
Well, on the ones, if possible, like we could probably even go back to those and find something that can be an adhesive. It would be nice to put a little red star and use our website. A number of years ago we didn't have a good website, but now, so that maybe the students or whatever, it'd be really cool for people to know who these people are. And if Dana's going to do the search, then it's an easy do to just put the history. So I don't know, a year or two from now, people might.
It
Just be
enhances our
interesting.
museum on the streets.
It does. I was thinking of putting another plaque, but putting multiple plaques on street signs now becomes like I don't know, like from an expense or work point of view, but certainly on a website. It's just a simple posting. If she can go back to the other two and we could find a way to paint a red star or something on them, that would be cool. If not, that's okay. We'll start with today, with this one,
At least in recent years, whenever we have passed the resolution naming giving an honorary name, the resolution has a
Right.
description of the reason why this person is being honored in this way. So we could easily on the website just link back to the minutes of
Something
the
like
meeting
that,
when
yeah.
it was approved. So you can have the resolution, you have the date that it happened, and all of our rationale for why.
So that would be really a great use of Dana's time and effort, which was always so interesting as far as I can
If
tell.
you wanted to go back to all the streets that were
No. I mean, I'm just suggesting we certainly should start with this one, but
Well, at least the last two are pretty easy to go
Yeah.
back to. So I don't know if
beyond that, yeah.
Peter Falk and Sonny Chirac and
Yeah.
whoever else we have.
So I guess we're putting this on I'm in support of the naming and everything, so putting it on for next week, is that what we're doing
Time
here?
for next week to call for a public hearing.
We have to call for a public hearing. Oh,
Really?
yeah. Okay.
Policy provides, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
wow.
sense. Yes,
Okay.
we want. Yeah, and that's actually a nice opportunity for people to chime in.
Good. We should let
Um,
the family know we're doing that, I guess.
Absolutely. Oh, Jim reaches out to me regularly to find out what's going on. I'll
Yeah.
let him know that.
I do feel a little bit bad that it's taken us longer than we had hoped to get to this
It
point,
ended
but
up becoming our test case.
right, but
developed
now that
now.
it's there, it should be much different going forward for others.
You know, my interaction with James Drohan Sr. was really as a crossing guard, which is near the later in his life because it's a couple blocks from where I live, and he was the crossing guard for both of my children who were walkers to Roosevelt School, and it was during my younger son's 5th grade year when he was walking to Roosevelt that Mr. Drohan had that he passed away, and my son's response was, "Oh, I'm so sorry. He was such a nice man." And he really did just have take such pride and such joy in that phase of his life of just safely crossing children from across Croton Avenue. And I didn't at the time know very much about, I mean, I knew he was a firefighter, but we have a lot of wonderful firefighters in our community. I was not aware until after his passing, and it is referenced in the report from Dana, that his death was related to his time on the pile at 9/11 and doing the rescue efforts. And so that's unfortunately a story that we're going to continue to hear through in our country, the aftermath of 9/11. And so it sounds like we will have a public hearing next week for this. And
Well, we'll call for it next week,
oh gosh, that's right. We'll call for the public hearing next week, and then we'll actually.
November 6th.
Thank you, sir. All right, so we'll let Jim know, and anybody else in the community that wants to come and speak at presumably the November 6th meeting can come and speak about this proposed naming. Okay, moving right along.
Right, I just got a text from Trustee Herrera. He's on his way.
Great.
So next is proposed local law 9/2019 revision to charter and/or village code regarding assistant village manager position. So I'm gonna pass these around. This is really a discussion about organizational management and efficiency. And since today marks my 4-month anniversary as
The
village
anniversary.
manager, we've had time to evaluate the village operations, and we think that we have some good suggestions as we go into 2020 to make operations more efficient and to get more work done and provide far more resident benefits as well. So the first page is the organization chart of the village manager's office, and that would be me as village manager with project manager Jamie Hoffman reporting to me, and Lisa Nestor, who's our junior administrative assistant, reporting 70% of her time to me. Stuart Kahan, Corporation Counsel, is also in the manager's office, with Lisa Ferguson, who's paralegal, reporting to him, and Lisa Nestor reporting to him 30% of her time. Although on any given day, I probably get the better end of that deal. So we also have 8 departments. Underneath, I did not put the clerk's office here, even though it is a town village clerk. But we have personnel, finance, Department of Public Works, planning, building department, recreation and parks, housing voucher program, and our IT department.
I just, OFD is always sort of like an anomaly because you don't hire and fire the fire department, but from a financial services perspective, perspective,
And
report
again,
to you.
these are sort of direct reports, and since
Yes,
you
okay.
know, so
Fair enough.
I'm looking
Yes, they're
at
not
it
your
from
employees,
organizational management, but there's also the Austin Fire Department, and then obviously we liaise with the Austin Police Department, which are all constitute the broader village network of organizations here. The total operating budget for the village is $53 million. And total employees, 175 employees. Each department that we've discussed here has a discrete, a very specific and important function, but there is limited centralized organizational and operations capacity. So with increased operations capacity, we can really get a lot more done, move a lot faster, and maximize efficiencies across the board. So just so you know what I do, appointed by the Board of Trustees, responsible for the administration of the day-to-day operations of the village, and Chief Executive and Administration Officer of the village, responsible for budgets, overseeing and implementing the budgets, negotiating agreements, bids, and contracts, preparing the capital budget upon village board approval, oversees the execution of all contracts required for successful implementation of the capital budget program, and acting as the director of the Office of Emergency Management, working closely with public safety officials and all local government, in addition to the day-to-day management of the staff departments. For 2020 specifically, the goals above and beyond the day-to-day operations are the comprehensive plan update, economic development strategy, planning and working on an implementation plan for that. Our DPW site development on Water Street, where we're looking, right now we're looking at, we have 8 submissions now that we're looking at for site concepts for affordable mixed income, mixed use housing at that site. We're also looking to beef up the building department code enforcement, really streamlining processes, increasing efficiencies. So one of the things that's underway there is that we will be going to an online platform for the submission of planning and building permits. You will be hearing about that at the October 23rd work session, and we look to have that online for first quarter. We're also looking at a youth bureau, possibility of a youth bureau implemented through the village, and that will require planning and implementation as well during the 2020 budget, should we decide to go in that direction and pursue that. Our project manager, Jamie Hoffman.
Are we waiting for the end of this to have a conversation, or are we doing?
You can ask questions if you want to ask questions now, or either way.
I'll wait till the end and comment on all the pages.
Okay.
So I don't stop your flow.
Okay, so our project manager, Jamie Hoffman, assists the village manager with administration, detail, personnel procedures, and performs general administrative duties. In addition to that, she coordinates all our public relations and public awareness of village activities, including the management of the website, web blast, social media platform, press releases, and the maintenance of updated village notices and postings. She coordinates the activities of the village manager's office with other departments and outside agencies. She provides primary support for the village manager and the village board in the creation and distribution of agendas and support materials for all board meetings. But she also has specific goals above and beyond her day-to-day responsibility. And right now, she's working with Bill Garrison at the Rec Department on a comprehensive policy review with, which will result in recommendations for a strategy for events, park, and community space usage. And this will really help facilitate our events while streamlining them and making sure that there's an easy process for permits and fees, but that process does take into consideration the entirety of what goes into an event, which includes staff time and our municipal resources as well. She is working very closely with our PR firm, expanding the Big Little Picture Big Little Picture campaign, and we're looking to expand that beyond Main Street throughout Ossining so that we get more people involved with not only the cleanliness of our streets, but just promoting all the good things Ossining does to keep their community vibrant and clean and thriving, and making sure that all of us are engaged in that process. Jamie's also right now working and coordinating the Ossining Counts 2020 census program, and she continues to do website optimization. And one of the things we'll focus on for 2020 is improved resident and employee usage of the website. We're looking at portals that would help facilitate residents to be able to communicate with us, let us know about issues, report things, and as well as an employee portal that will help provide information about benefits programs and things like that too. Our junior administrative assistant, Lisa Nestor, is responsible for assisting in carrying out administrative details and assignments involved in the operations of the municipality. And that is basic administrative operations in our office, but she also manages all the filming that goes on. And this week we had a movie, it was a romantic comedy that was filmed at Dee Diner. She arranges for all of that, make sure that everything's in place, and she does a fabulous job at doing so. She does all our resolutions and provides support to Corporation Counsel as well. And she is also a great resource because she's been here for 24 years, so she is a good Ossining village management historian as well. So,
She does all of our proclamations too, and she does a great job.
yes,
have
I said resolution, I meant proclamations.
Yeah, she
I'm
does
sorry.
a really great job at researching them and drafting them and making sure that we don't forget about them. So all we have to do is tell her once and she keeps them.
So again, looking at the size of our organization, the number of departments, and the things that we want to do, the ambitious goals we want to have, and the things that we need to do to keep on improving our services for the community, we do need more capacity. And one of the things we're proposing is, and that the reason that we're doing this at this meeting is the county is requiring to even consider this position, that it be incorporated to either the code and or charter or both. So we're complying with county requirements for this, and we want to allow for this for this to be considered now and for future in the future of the village. And the main reasons is it really increases our capacity. So the village manager really operates as a direct assistant with managerial capacity to the village manager. The assistant village manager can step in and oversee when the manager is not available. It's really, think about like a chief operations officer is probably the corporate equivalent. And one of the things that we could do, there's a lot of things, a lot of projects that we've talked about in the past. We've done studies and we want to be able to act on them. Some of them, however, really require not just one department, but multiple departments and stakeholders to be engaged, and a tremendous amount of work to activate whatever plan that is. So if we just look at parking, for example, so a comprehensive parking plan that would include overnight parking policies and new meters and a new parking system within the village where we have metered parking and tag parking. That alone, that project, and I've been discussing this with Chief Sylvester, that alone, that project requires a fairly significant amount of community engagement. We have to talk to all the business owners in the business district where there's meters parkings because they have very, very different requirements. Some of them want people in and out. There's quick businesses, 10 minutes. Other ones like hair salons and spas may have people there for 3 hours. Our current parking meters don't really facilitate that. And we also have multiple different types of tag parking and 3-hour parking. So a new system, which requires a little bit of research, we've looked at different systems, but to actually implement it effectively would be looking at the right system, getting all our stakeholders together, getting that information, and then evaluating the placement of that system. So before we even pick something and shovel it to the ground, there's a tremendous amount of work to get to that place. However, if we get to that place, we are likely to see a huge return on investment. The estimates that we've done internally indicate that whatever system we do would probably pay for itself within the first 6 months to a year, and after that, it's revenue. So right now, we're just to give perspective, we're probably getting about $70,000 to $80,000 a year through our current metered system. An enhanced system can easily double that figure, and that's being conservative. So there's a significant upside, and it also enables us to use parking more efficiently, make sure that people aren't abusing parking, who shouldn't be parking in spaces, and it's much easier for our police department to enforce parking because this can all be done with license plate readers, and it's a much quicker process. So not only will it be increased revenue, it's increased efficiency too on staff time. Another thing that has come up is Henry Gordine Park. We have a kiosk there that's been sitting empty for a couple of years. In order to get somebody in there, we need to issue an RFP. We need to evaluate the responses from that RFP and make sure that we get a good provider in there. That's a lot of work, but again, once it's done, it will result in more revenue for the village, and a much more fun experience down at the riverfront. We've talked about grants management and grant readiness in the past. So while you can always hire a grant writer, the grant writer is only as good as the work you have and the plans you have that you're ready to submit for any sort of grant funding. And this requires internal work. So realistically, to be successful in the Downtown Revitalization Initiative grant or the consolidated funding applications that will be due next year, we really need to start planning on those now, anticipating, putting together really concrete plans and plans of actions, because what the state's looking for is ready projects, shovel-ready projects in most cases, where you're ready to go. That, again, is a tremendous amount of work internally that does not necessarily fall into any one department or is the sole responsibility of any one department head. It requires a tremendous amount of coordination. Additionally, the ability to work and focus on intermunicipal agreements and strategies, and interdepartmental coordination and collaborative strategies provide significant benefits to the village. So if you look at all the things that we're doing, when we're doing a lot, the size of the organization, the number of departments, the work those departments are doing, because this is all above and beyond the day-to-day work of paving the roads and making sure the streets are clean and everything else that we're doing here, running a housing voucher program, all of those things that we provide every day, but going above and beyond and making sure that we're as efficient as possible, that we're making sure that we're bringing resources to the community through grant funding that we'll otherwise miss. There's a tremendous return on investment with greater capacity to activate those things. And if we look at budget impact, if we look at the 2019 budgeted salary line, we budgeted $860,325,000 for total salaries in 2019. For 2020 right now, where we stand right now with the budget, and it's still a little bit early, we're budgeting $17,782,674, which means that our salary line is going down by over $77,000 this year. That means that some of the positions that we had budgeted for 2019, either by attrition or because we've decided not to fill positions that were in that budget, we've gone down, but we've also, not only does this budget, the revised budget for 2020 so far include an assistant village manager, it also accounts for a potential youth bureau director and a recreation supervisor that would help facilitate our Sunday openings. So we're really not adding staff. We're not building an empire here. We're really making staff more efficient. So just in summary, to restate, the addition of assistant village manager will increase efficiency, productivity, and it will accelerate the implementation of our longstanding projects that are needed to address critical needs in the community, the ability to realize our untapped revenue, grant readiness to generate additional resources for public works initiatives, and more cost-effective and impactful interdepartmental and intermunicipal partnerships, as well as the potential for increased community engagement activities to make sure that when we're doing this, we are realizing the needs and recognizing the voices of all people in our community. So that is why we are recommending the addition of this position in the code and or the charter.
Thank you. I heard and saw Rika scribbling, so do you want to kick us off,
I wanted to wait
Rika?
till you would. I'm just going to go page by page, if that's
That's
okay.
fine.
So I appreciate the write-up. I just have some or small, minor things, some are sort of more big picture. So these things tend to get a life of their own, these documents. If you're gonna put Stuart Kahn, who reports the board, but not to you, if you did it only because of Lisa, you could have just put a box, either take it off or add the police department in and say, you know, that's a separate, because these things sort of fly on their own, and I think Stuart has also not only a paralegal, but I think Sonia's on there, and he's gonna have a land use
Yes.
firm. So because these pages tend to sort of people cut and paste, either tell the whole story or don't, or leave it off, but don't do it halfway, because then it's actually wrong. So that would be my only, do it however you want, but that's my only suggestion.
Thank
I
you for
think
that.
on the total employees, you should say how many of our employees are part-time and full-time. As you said, like people sort of talk numbers a lot. I hope people talk numbers a lot. I wish people would talk numbers more, but let's differentiate. And I don't know if that includes all of the camp counselors and stuff like that that you hire, that 175. Does it include all those? You might want to say it excludes it, because then people say, oh, well, 100 of them are really, you know, kids or whatever. So I really appreciate, by the way, all this stuff. On a big picture, all of your goals, 2020, really aren't actually goals. They're actually strategic initiatives. They're not like to comprehensive plan update is not a goal. A goal would be complete the comprehensive, you know, create committees, add revenues. Those are actually goals. These are strategic initiatives in addition to the regular job. If I were to write this, would have done 75% of the time is spent on what you said, the roads, and I would have done that through all of them. The project manager, I believe that people in our community, even the 150 that are really attuned to us, and then the other hundreds that are sort of attuned, forget that, like, you know, whatever happens in the news is not our latest initiative. It's actually the roads, the toilet, the clean water, the sign, you know, and that's what our staff spends a lot of their expertise on. And in fact, that's what they were hired to do. I feel like if somebody looks at this document, unless you're knowing that, you don't want to always be saying that. You want to say 75% of the project manager time is spent. This is, and that's why I think these are actually initiatives and not goals, because, and they're not nice to haves. They're things that the project manager, Jamie, will be actually working on, but they're extra in addition to taking the calls. I also think when I look at the time, and I can give you my notes because there's some syntax and I don't want to go through that. Just also in the big picture, I think for the project manager, she spent a lot of time the last year and a half dealing with animal issues. And I'm not being funny here, but there are the feral cats issues. You know, we have things that are brought to us by the community that become our issues. It's not something we planned on, but because they're now for 2 years been a part of the attorneys, I do think that people should be recognized on staff for things that they end up spending a lot of their time. I don't believe that the public understands how much time, for example, Jamie and Stuart have spent on that. I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't have spent that time, but I would argue they'd spend more time on that than on some of the other things that people think they spent on, and really without judgment. But I do think an accounting of what people do is a part of a budget process and a plan. And that I'm not telling you how to do it or where to do it, but I do think, and maybe in 3 years that will not be a thing, and maybe it should be. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe that is, but it's not really, and the little, like I said, I'll give you the little things. It's not as far as the junior administrative assistant, I don't know, is Lisa full-time?
Yes.
Okay, so all of these are full-time, the ones that are assisted, okay. So I would say again that this whole thing with filming, if I may suggest, in some villages and cities and towns, it's a business. They don't just intake, they proactively seek out film crews, they put it on the website, they tell. I think we are now big enough, and I know, as Victoria's pointed out, we're just out of that mileage, right? Nevertheless, with New York City's film industry booming and continues to boom from what I understand, I'm looking at
I
you
pay my
because
mortgage, yeah.
well, and Bob DeRao told me the same thing. His wife works on Broadway. They're exceedingly business. They're constantly looking for spots. We're a great village for that. I think that a little bit more emphasis on Lisa actually proactively looking and not just being like a order taker would increase the value, I think, to the community of what Lisa does. You know, that's
Absolutely.
just something I would, and we should help think about how we want to go after, like is an economic development piece. Like we can assign Lisa an actual economic development line for that. And the county has a lot of support for
The
that.
county's doing a program that's coming up in the next couple of weeks, and Lisa and Jamie will be going to that
Yeah,
program.
I went. Did you
And
go last year at Sleep? They had a thing at Sleep. I went actually for the village.
Lisa actually went up to CIA and did
Okay.
the whole program up there.
Yeah, there's like a bunch. New Rochelle's doing stuff very different from what Yonkers is doing. Very like some places charge and others want it for free, but the people whose houses they use, there's like a whole thing, and we might want to become a bigger player in that. I am in support of an assistant village manager. Let me just say that up front. I think others have different opinions. I do, however, think that she's working on initiatives. These are not goals. I really want a much clearer understanding. You did it verbally. It needs to be here. The revenue from doing the traffic, the parking correctly, I don't know. How long is, you guys were talking about before I became a trustee.
Me too.
Like, I think that if nothing else, the reason we need this is because the village manager tends to function like one of our residents who texts all the time, like popcorn. It pops over here, everybody runs here. It pops over there, everybody runs there. Every year we switch some board members, and whatever they come with, everybody has to run and pop over there. But this assistant might be able to rein in some of that, have actual initiatives on a piece of paper, but I do think you need to add revenues. Not one of these has an actual, intermunicipal agreement, like, that's not a goal. It's like, what exactly,
So-
that kind of a
So
thing.
some of that is just that I'm hesitant to put numbers down because it requires further analysis. So I would hate to overpromise and underdeliver.
Okay.
But you're talking about significant sums of money here.
Mhm.
So when it's as we go forward and we look to if we approve this position, we look to fill those things will be and then there, to your point, I think articulating them as initiatives the way they're written here probably does make a lot more sense, but they will be tied to goals in terms of what the outcomes are.
I would add that that's fine, or change the wording. Interdepartment coordination collaboration strategies. So I think you know what that means because it's a great business term, but I think the real thing here is the purpose here is to increase better, improved customer service. It is really about our residents, not about our people all
Absolutely.
getting along, because they all already get along, actually. It's really for someone to coordinate their efforts to also point out where increases should happen, and frankly, what's missing here is where decreases should happen. There are
Absolutely.
inefficiencies that should be stated, and the job of this person should be to make recommendation to eliminate. We're not building ourselves things. We're building and we're taking down. Otherwise, what the heck is the point? You don't just keep building on top of things. And it really is to reduce redundancies. So I would actually say it's not so much collaboration strategies, but actually increase customer service or resident, the customer service part of it so that it benefits our residents directly in the service they repeat. I would say in English that the right hand should know what the left hand is doing, because our most often heard complaint, I'm not sure for you, but certainly I hear it, I think they just go to somebody like a trustee for this, is that they go here and they get told something and they go there. And I think that is a symptom of the left hand and the right hand not talking to each other, because the left hand is too busy doing what the left hand does and the right hand does what the right hand is supposed to do. It's a silo, and they don't mean to, but they never get to the point of seeing the big picture. And I think that this position is actually in charge of making sure, but also pointing out where maybe we move from the left hand to the right hand, everything. Because it doesn't make sense. It's like a very important thing to do in large organizations. And just on a macro level, what was missing for me from this, and it's no, I mean, I think this is great. I told you that. It's you have to talk about the increase in our population. Okay, because in the 10 years or in the 20 years, over a 25-year period, a 5% increase in the population is huge. We have seen much more than that. And so using structures need to be reevaluated. Now, maybe this is how you think it should be done, maybe somebody else thinks no, but I do think that is a driver of, and let's be honest, diverse communities like ours Portchester, I just spoke to somebody in Mamaroneck, also require more work. There's nothing bad about that. It's good. But that is a part of our character that too requires a certain kind of growth that you have to grow with the community, being very careful to eliminate positions that are also antiquated and are no longer necessary. So, I mean, the rest is just,
Thank you.
little things. I think it's good. You've already heard what I support or don't, so.
Thank you so much.
Other comments?
Just have one comment, I guess.
Oh, I'm so
Overall.
embarrassed. You have one and I went on for
Oh.
like 10 minutes?
That is 175 full-time employees, by the way.
Oh, there we are.
So there was thank you, Rika, because he actually took a lot of the stuff that I was going over. But
Okay.
one of the things that I actually, on the project manager, nothing to put more stuff into Jamie's plate, but something that it was done in regards to the building department and what we're trying to accomplish for next year. I think will be helpful for her to guide them in a lot of the stuff that's going to be implemented, especially because there's going to be customer service related. There's going to be a lot of engagement with the community itself, and sorry, Jamie, you're really good at that kind of stuff. There's a lot of online applications and things of that nature that she's helping already for the community center. I think it will be helpful for that to be engaged within that area as
She
well.
is very good at those things.
So, but yes, I am actually, there's a lot of stuff, that we would like to accomplish, and I can only speak for the stuff that I have seen from being part of the board in the past that, that we put our goals and resolutions that we want to do for our community. And there's times that it's like I'm looking at sometimes in my email and I'm like, man, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do this. I need to accomplish those things. And I just don't have enough time during the day or during the week to do those things. I still have a couple emails that I need to answer from 2 weeks ago that they're texting me. And that's because we do a lot of stuff. Obviously we have a full-time job, and this is our part-time full-time job. And then you have 5 people plus the rest of the community doing things that you have to accomplish. And again, I am in support of having an assistant. I think will help us to get to the goals that we would like to see accomplished through the years to come. So, yes, I'm good with that. I guess the only additional question that I have is to Stuart. So, how does this work in relationship to, what the county wants to see and what that means for us as a board that we have?
That's the proposed local law. That's the revision to the charter that gives the manager the authority to bring in an assistant village manager who would assume the responsibilities of the village manager during his or her absence or inability to act. That's particularly critical language for the county. They wanted to see that the assistant village manager would assume the responsibilities of the village manager if the manager could not, was out for some period of time. And the county has insisted on that. Portchester, which I should also point out is also a charter village, has similar language, but they have it in their code because all their provisions for their manager are in their code. We have it in our charter, so it would simply be another paragraph in the charter provision dealing with the village manager's responsibilities.
If that resolution was to pass, that has to go to the state and it has to come back. So what is the time period of time with something
Well,
like that?
if the board authorized the calling of a public hearing, the resolution to call for the public hearing could be next week. You could have the public hearing on the 6th. Then you theoretically could vote on the 20th, and it would go to the Department of State, and they'll probably file it within 2 to 3 weeks after that.
So we're looking at the end of the year. It's about
Or
Most
early
likely.
January with the holidays.
Other comments?
Question's time for Karen, because as I'm looking around the room, I guess the question is for Victoria and Manny. I have never had the experience of knowing an assistant village manager. By the time that I got to this board, there was no assistant village manager. So the only two that well, actually, you were here.
You and I both.
Yeah, yeah, but you were here partially. I mean, now that I think about it. But, or Omar, you were here. I would like to understand what the assistant village manager did to, prior to my time coming here. And I want to understand what was the logic to remove the position because you guys actually were here at the time.
The previous person that was in the position of assistant village manager, her performance was reflective of what was requested of her by her manager at the time, just as this would be. And then there was a different manager, and that position was eliminated.
What were the roles? What did that person do at that time?
Whatever was the assignment directed again by us, the request of some additional information that we may have done or something that the village manager had in that position is pretty much, I don't want to say it's very similar to what we are requesting, what Karen is requesting for the village manager. At that time, the board felt that we didn't need that because we were trying to reorganize our village and our community at that time and see how that worked best. You know, it was different people in the administration, as you know. So there were changes that were made at that time. So
So I guess my question for you, Karen, is there does the county have like a job description?
Yes.
Okay.
So some of what's reflected in here is a summarized part
Okay.
of that job description, and the major elements of it are reflected in the job description here.
Okay. No further questions.
Trustee Herrera, do you have any questions or comments?
Sure. Good evening. Pardon my tardiness, everyone. I definitely want to thank the manager. You know, when I first came aware of this, I kind of wanted to see kind of a breakdown as to how she kind of saw in her office the different roles. I respect the process, and this is part of the process of beginning the conversation as to whether or not it's an appropriate use of time and money and resources and how to move the village forward, and especially the office that does all that management and operations. I personally, between the project manager role, which to me has always been subjective since it began, as to what the work was, how it's evaluated, how it's what the deliverables are, how they're measured, who determines them. So like I see, like social media platforms. I know that we don't have a social media presence besides putting a link, right? So whereas other communities have an actual strategy and policy, and I'm not saying that it should be the person in that role to actually do all of that because some of it is policy, right? So, but then I also see some stuff in the junior admin assistant, and I also see some a couple of areas in the proposed village manager one, and of course, I have my expectations or what I was sold when we hired a new manager. So I even though we see that there's going to be, I think we called it was it a net positive? He called it like it wasn't gonna.
Right now, as it stands, it's a reduction in total salaries versus 2019. Again, that's based on what we have. We're still working on the budget. We don't really anticipate, things could change between now and the end of the year. But the idea is not to, is try to keep at least, especially the higher salaries, budgeted positions at a minimum.
Karen, just a quick question. Do you see this, you had talked about some of the goals, managing grants of the parking. Once some of these things are done, do you still see this as a needed position?
Well, I think we're going to always continue to have more things that require a tremendous amount of work that don't always fall into the 75% of the work that we do day to day. And one of the things that Trustee Levin alluded to, which is very, very much the case, is right now the village operates, the day-to-day work gets done, but we lose opportunity because of the reactive nature of the job. And there's no way to change that. it will always be somewhat reactive. But right now, the concern is I think that we're disproportionately reactive and there's a little bit too much popcorn going on. We lose efficiency that way. We get derailed easily. Projects that require more time get pushed back, and that's why they don't happen as quickly as we would like them to. I don't see that changing. What I see is a centralized function probably will always add to greater efficiency. It's been my experience in running other organizations that having that cross-lateral opportunity to make sure that you're always getting the most out of everybody, but also making sure that you're constantly looking at things, communicating and moving things forward is hard to do when you don't have somebody and positions that actually drive that forward. It's not a lot of resources. It's actually a very efficient way to get a lot more out of, because otherwise things tend to be more siloed. The village manager job can be very reactive sometimes, and it really is trying to get it, instead of 80% reactive and 20% day to day, is shift that balance the other way around.
I think what would be helpful is to really understand, what's actually like, what people are doing day to day. That would be helpful because, there are goals, right? I know what certain positions and what they're doing, but I'm not sure without without getting too much into the detail, what people are doing and like, is everybody doing what they're supposed to be doing? Can people be doing something differently?
Well, are you talking about everybody in the entire organization?
No.
Or are you talking about the manager's office?
I'm talking about the manager's office.
Okay.
and just some of the things that I've seen here without.
So I think there's always opportunity to sort of tweak things as we go along. The job descriptions that you see here pretty much sum up the day to day. So the things that are identified as initiatives or goals are actually things that we are in progress and are working on now. So that's a pretty good description of the day to day. The day to day can be very different on any given day, given what initiatives that, getting ready for events is a tremendous amount of work. There's a lot of things that sort of go unrecognized. The amount of time the phone rings and its constituents calling with different issues and requests. In addition to some of the things we're doing here, we're meeting with developers who are looking to do projects in the village. We're meeting with people who want to do events. We're meeting with any number of the committees and commissions that are part of the village system, talking to them about projects that they want to do. We're managing them. So right now, I would say that there's not a lot of downtime for anybody. But one of the things we'd like to do is make sure that we're focusing on the priorities that need the most focus, and making sure that we're managing the day-to-day and still being very responsive to the many, many calls that come into the office. So I think there's always the opportunity to sort of tweak and shift, and we're getting into that groove, and I think we've already done a lot of that. But if we write everything down, it's a much longer presentation.
Yes, I would say that as we start to think about budget meetings, that we talk more about that, about what the day to day is, and even as you do your manager's reports, if there are a lot of calls and there, because I imagine that we don't know every single thing. We probably get the emails of the things that rise above the fray.
You don't get every call.
Right.
I'm not telling you every call.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So just to paint a clearer picture, because for me personally, I have seen different iterations. We've had different managers. We've had different, and each manager comes in with something that they need, but then what happens is what they need kind of stays around or something like that, and at some point, particularly as it comes to the budget, that's the two things that we do. We do budgets and we pass policy and legislations. So even though I'm not going to be here, I still want to make sure that we're, that we're maximizing everything. I don't want to be, that's my thing right now. Is particularly with this particular ask, just because I've seen so many different iterations.
So one of the things that I want to tell you about my management style, and because you are somewhat familiar with organizational management, working with me in a former life, um, it's really want to see things operated as efficiently as possible. So organizational management changes can dramatically impact your ability to leverage resources and work more effectively. That is the goal here. So this change is, if there's a goal here that we would want to realize and see that return, it's a return on investment, which if that is not the case, then this would not be something I would continue to support. So, this is all driven by making sure that we're as efficient as possible and there's a return on investment.
And I think it's been said by another trustee, but that would be helpful, right, to understand like what are if this is going to go through, what is going to be like, what are we getting, like,
Right.
what's gonna happen here, because if it doesn't happen
Right.
and those things are not met, it will definitely be up to the board to see why this thing should continue.
So the thing is that you guys have been talking about implementing a new parking plan for some time now. Look, things change. You've had some management changes that always delays, things. However, this is something that would absolutely be an objective to get going for 2020 to have it in place. Once it's in place, again, I really am want to be conservative, but you're looking to at least double revenue, but also more importantly, make things more efficient for the business owners in the community and the community at large in terms of parking, because it would also be our policies on overnight parking and other things that have become problematic. So there would be a direct return on investment that I think probably could be more significant than that, but I just don't want to say without knowing. I haven't really looked at what a rental fee for Henry Gordine Park kiosk would be, but I imagine that you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars over the course of a year that now it's been year 3, we haven't realized. So that would be another goal that, I would like to see that kiosk operating by next summer. So if, that would be, unless something happens that, for reasons beyond my control, those would be 2 things that I would want operational by the end of 2020. In addition to also the streamlining of the permitting process, building permit process, and I think I said this before you got here, we're on track to have online planning applications and building permits by first quarter next year. That'll be presented, our recommendations will be presented at a work session in 2 weeks. So that's another efficiency that will drive. But those are things that I think are doable. I think the thing that stands in the way of doing it is the reactive nature of the work that we do, and just being able to make sure that we are constantly driving that and not losing that as other things come up.
Thank you.
Can I add something to your list?
Sure.
And at some point, hopefully, I'll be able to bring it back maybe for budget. We need an elevator.
Well,
Op center.
say it out loud.
That's going to be discussed in the budget, in the capital improvements, the capital budget for DPW. So that's another, that is something we do need. Yeah, we desperately need that too.
That's a capital improvement, not this.
That is, yeah, for now, yeah. That's
So a lot, I keep rereading this page, and I saw it before, but a lot of the items, and I know that what I won't call them job descriptions or job tasks, but goals, which I consider any project manager, really any professional in the office of the manager to be able to do, with the exception of the really diving into like the municipal agreements, strategies, recommendations. That's really policy stuff, along with the board.
That would be just doing the backup work so that you
Yeah.
can be informed, not doing the policy, but the background work so you can have informed policy.
No, I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just, but like all
But
those.
just to make sure we're not taking over any board roles in
Okay,
this. So
absolutely.
that's not the objective.
In the past, whether it's any staff that we get rid of or bring on, we always have to explain its reasoning, right? So I remember a few years back, we hired staff for the after school program at the rec center. I could explain the program had about 15 more kids, a huge enrollment compared to previous years. So, to have what they call the student staff ratio, I could explain all that, when it comes to why that, and that's really a small example and not really a great example for this. But to the taxpayer who doesn't really, understand, and I'm not going to assume that all don't understand, so please don't take it as that. But I don't know how to sell this, and I also would like to see that if this weren't to happen going forward in the new year, how would you operate given those constraints, right? So the board hasn't proposed this, you are, right? So if this weren't to be, how would that impact the village operations and management going forward? Besides, obviously, what is known to be common, right? So, like, of course, you can't apply to every grant, and you can't, go to every event, and you can't plan everything, But are we at such a bad spot? Are we? Of course, there's always potential and opportunities, but is it? I see it more as a want instead of a necessity right now, especially when a lot of the goals are project oriented. They're not even public administration oriented. And regardless of the net positive, we're still spending money on something we didn't spend on before. And I just don't really, even with this in front of me, if I had to explain it tomorrow, I wouldn't really know.
So can I just, before you walked in, we had that conversation. So it's on the video, but I agree. There needs to be, so what does it get us? Like the so what is for me missing, so I don't know if they're goals rather than initiatives. Your second point of what happens if you don't have it, I think is a very good point. It's a talking point. I'm not sure, it's usually not written. It's usually something when somebody presents, and I think that adds value. If you don't have it, if I had to, I don't sell things to anybody, but if I know what you mean, if we had to explain, somebody came up to me in the street, I'd say, I think without an assistant village manager, my experience here is that the parking's not getting done. This whole parking study, the parking change, the work with the police and the village managers and the finance department, it's not going to happen because we're going to keep getting derailed by 14 other things like we have for the past 4 or 5 years. I'm not saying we should have gone derailed. I'm not saying it was the right thing. I'm not saying, I just don't believe it'll happen without this. I'm not saying that's exactly what you're pointing to, but your theory of, I think, is a good one for the village manager in her presentation to bring forth and say, like, I just don't believe that given the staff that we'll get to maybe X, Y, and Z, like, it's always like a good thing to point out so that there's a clearer understanding of if I don't get it, I don't think we'll get, or we might get to it, but in 3 years, right? So it's also a time issue. You can get to the same thing. It might simply take you longer. If you have more people and or more money, you get things done faster. If you have fewer people and or less money, you'll get them done. It might just take longer. So does the board want to take longer to do something? It's a classic business case. I agree with you. And I actually think some of it was actually discussed before we walked in. So you're almost like, in some ways, putting an exclamation point on it by saying that there is some agreement that may need to be added a bit in there. I think it's a good point.
I also we've talked for a little while about this. I think we're only at a stage where what we're going to say is that next week we're going to call for a public hearing to take place 3 weeks from now. So this does not have to be the end of the conversation. So if there's any last minute questions or points to be made, then let's wrap this up.
So, what would be helpful? Because as I'm looking at your
Yes.
as you talk about what you prepare, right? We know, you may start budget season late August, right, up until November, right? So as you talk about the budgets, talking about um, certain bids and contracts, there may be certain times of years, like certain time of year that certain things happen. And so what I would like to understand is when those things happen, typically, to the best of and right, and then and then to understand like how does that overlay with what the assistant village manager is going to be doing, right? Because at the
Right.
same time, we also must realize that what the county is also asking is that whatever you do, they can also do.
Absolutely. So, so I think that this, if you're going to say, absolutely, there's no question. If you're going to say, what are you getting out of this, and why it's an important budget consideration, and why it's an efficiency driver, the reason I'm presenting it, and that for consideration, again, we can't even do anything until we have it in the code, and whether we want to do it or not, just because it's in the code doesn't mean you have to do it. But the reason that I think it's very, very important, because the issue is not if things will get done, because I will strive to get them done. It's when. And because you have things that are revenue producing, revenue generating for every year, for every month, for every day that you don't get this done, that's longer time and that money accumulates. So if you just look at the Henry Gordine kiosk alone, that could be, I'm guessing $50,000 a year, 30 to, I don't know. I have no idea really, because we haven't done the work on it. So if that takes another year or 2 years, that's not 50,000. That's now, almost, $300,000 that the village hasn't done because there wasn't enough capacity to drive that project forward. If you're looking at the parking, even if you're a conservative estimate doubling your parking, the longer it takes you to do, or doubling what you're getting from parking revenues and efficiencies, because it's not all about the revenues. But if you're looking at from a cost perspective, every year you don't do that, that's more that money compounds. So the reason that you want to do it sooner than later for these specific initiatives is because, and then grants as well. Grants become a cumulative thing once you start doing them. So those are the reasons to Trustee Herrera's point of why this, like what you get. It's not as easy as hiring somebody to do a program because you have a new program. It's a little bit, it's what you make it, but as we go forward with this, we can put a much finer point on what those deliverables are.
Did you have a final comment or question?
The assistant village manager is going to be writing grants, or they're going to be managing, just overlooking the grants.
I think that they'll have we would definitely want somebody who can write grants, and if we can do grant writing internally, that's great. I think if we have a high volume of grants and we want somebody, and we have to evaluate what types of grants we have at stake and what the capacity is, but it would also be the hardest part about a grant isn't writing the grant, it's the pre-planning for the content of the grant, which the grant writer doesn't do. And if you get the grant, it is the implementation and management of that grant, which can be enormously time consuming.
And lastly, what is this costing?
A assistant village manager pay scale, I think, is about $120,000 a year.
Okay.
So, okay.
So my last point is, and I will definitely watch the beginning of the meeting that I was late for and I missed, but really in preparation for the public hearing, where I guess I'll have to do more feedback since we're kind of cutting the discussion to prepare for the public hearing, for then us to have a separate discussion on it, which is fine. In order for me to prep for that, I realized that we went from, right, so manager, village manager, then I was on the board with the mayor and Trustee Casada, where we made some new appointments in the office of the manager. We never had a project manager. Then we added that. I just need a good understanding whether it's because we added a whole new role to that office in addition to the junior administrative assistant. So
No, no.
right, so
No, because the technical title for Jamie's title, we call it project manager internally. She's confidential secretary to the village manager. That's the same title that Joe Sorrentini had.
right, but I believe the salary went up when that transition was made.
I don't think it went up substantially. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't a.
We've gone up anyway.
I'd have to go back. I don't.
I
Okay.
will say at the time though that when Joe was here, there was some idea that he would sort of play a role as a assistant village manager at the time. I mean, things are different now, but I did.
Well, understanding how we budgeted, how the public appointed positions were dealt with. I mean, that all that history is necessary in order to make a fiduciary, um, you know, decision for our budget, but also to understand more in depth the task that for whatever reason, valid or not, can or cannot be done, and the timelines, and kind of have a further discussion as to it's totally understandable for a board of 5 appointed part-time trustees to always
Elected, we're all elected.
elected to that's why I said part-time elected to always we could bring up 20 different items every week as this board is known to do the past like over 20 years in Austin, not just this board when it comes to policies and ideas and asking of the manager's office or corp counsel to do this or that, but having a discussion as to at what point who determines a derailment or a suspension, and that will really help us, hopefully, I think, understand what progress actually means in the village and in that office.
Okay, so I'll just say my final comments, and then this will go on the agenda next week to call for a public hearing.
I don't like to be a pain, but no one's commented on the local law. I mean, are you folks all okay with that? Because I don't,
Because that's what you're putting up there.
that's, I know it's sort of subsidiary, but if we're amending the charter, I just want to make sure that you folks, I mean, we'll have a chance at the public hearing, but before we do that, I just wanted to see that do you want another copy of it?
Yes, I was.
Just read it or give me a
I'll take a
copy
copy.
because I now have to find it.
Okay, I'll read it to everyone, but
Or give us a copy if you have.
I'll give you a copy.
That's all.
Let me just make sure I have.
We can share.
No, I have plenty. I just didn't want to give you from other jurisdictions because that really wouldn't help.
Confusing, yes.
The new language would add a paragraph C, which would say that the village manager may appoint an assistant village manager who shall perform the duties and assume the responsibilities of the village manager during his or her absence or inability to act. The assistant village manager shall have such duties as may be assigned by the village manager. The Board of Trustees shall fix the assistant village manager's salary and other terms and conditions of employment not inconsistent with the provisions hereof.
Stuart, is this seeing how we used to have this position? Is this some? Did we used to have a code provision for this?
No, could not find one.
Okay.
I looked. The language here, Trustee Bazemore, is actually what is used in Portchester,
Okay.
or very close to what Portchester has. I did look for that, and thanks to Lisa and Esther, I did look at the old charters and the old codes, but I did not actually see anything specifically dealing with an assistant village manager position within the code.
There is a job description for assistant village manager from the county that was referenced that I assume this would be consistent with.
That's correct, but in other words, in terms of positions, that position does not appear as a particular code section.
Right.
And again, the reason this is being done is because the county has now indicated that there must be a specific provision in our code or charter that has the assistant village manager assuming the position of the responsibilities of the village
Well,
manager.
which is interesting because we don't have in our charter, our code or charter, most village positions. So the elected officials, and then it's the appointed officials. It's the manager, it's the corp counsel, it's the police chief probably, the clerk, and the treasurer, and deputy corp counsel. Those are the only ones that are coming to mind as actually listed in the charter and described in the charter.
Deputy Corp Counsel is not listed.
It's
in the
not,
charter.
okay. It's listed somewhere.
It's listed in the code under defense and indemnification.
Thank you, sir. And I think those are the only positions that are specifically described in our code or in our charter, probably because they are all appointed officials. So is this saying that this is an appointed official, and there's some logic to that, because if the manager is absent, then it automatically, the responsibilities of the manager go to the assistant village manager. So that does give that person certainly an elevated amount of responsibility.
But I agree, but it has not been, the way this is worded as a revision would not make it a board appointment to make it one of the appointed officials of the board, such as court counsel, clerk.
Because all of those are either, sometimes we directly appoint, but like the treasurer, I mean, we don't think of Tom as our appointee, but he is. We approve. It's recommended by the manager and approved by the
This
board.
would be just an appointment. And again, it's because the county's HR department has explicitly advised Linda, they advised Steve Sage, that in order to have this position approved, that language must be in either the code or the charter.
Okay.
So when we say that it has to assume the positions of the village manager in their absence, what if, so when they assume the responsibility, they become the village manager?
It'd be an acting village.
There'll be an acting village manager.
It's just like we had to appoint somebody when
Okay.
we didn't have one. We had to all
Like
scramble
when I
and look for
appoint
one.
Stuart or Paul or somebody
Yeah.
else
Right.
from out of town.
Right. But in this case, it's no longer necessary for the
Right, it
manager
would
to identify
automatically
somebody.
go to the-
Automatically, unless both of them are not here, then they would have to be appointed. It's the same as mayor, deputy mayor. If I'm not here, it's automatically Rika. If we're both absent, then we have to appoint somebody. Otherwise, the remaining
We've had that
trustees appoint
problem,
themselves.
actually.
So what happens if there's no village man? Like, say if, you know, Karen says, "Hey, I'm going off somewhere."
Resigning.
Like she resigns. Does this person automatically become the village manager, or
The under this section, the person would, but they don't necessarily. Let me be clear on two things.
okay?
The assistant village manager is not subject to section 75 of the civil service law, so they wouldn't have hearings. And they basically serve at the pleasure, effectively, of the village manager.
Mhm.
So if that person then became village manager for whatever purpose, and this board determined that they did not want to keep that person any longer, they could simply terminate that person.
Okay, that's
And it's employee at will. It's like,
And I think the key word here is may in your paragraph, because it doesn't obligate us to have an assistant village
Correct.
manager.
Right.
It gives permission to the village manager to choose an assistant village manager. Am I right?
That is correct.
Okay. That's an
Okay.
important word.
All right. This has been a discussion. I want to say, Karen, I've experienced a lot of village managers in my now 7 years of service in elected office here in Ossining, and I could not be happier with your performance. Thank you. Happy
Thank you very
4-month
much.
anniversary. I was told when I was first elected that I may grow very frustrated in working in municipal government because it moves very, very slowly. It's a big institution. It's like moving a big ship. It takes a long time for things to happen. That said, there have been things we have been talking about for 7 years. And it's not that they haven't moved. They just haven't gotten off the ground. And a lot of that is what we've been talking about tonight, because it's far too reactive and not proactive of a government. I think you've laid out a path so that you can be a more proactive government. You can be able to handle all of the reactions that are necessary for putting out all the fires that arise every single day in municipal government, but still have the capacity to be able to move forward the initiatives that you've identified here that are of utmost importance to this board, and I look forward to that happening. So I am absolutely supportive of us moving forward with next week calling for a public hearing, and then 2 weeks after that having the public hearing and moving this forward as quickly as possible. Thank you for putting together this presentation tonight.
thank you very much.
All right, next up.
I just want to say thank you to Stuart as well to do all his homework looking into this. So yeah.
You're welcome.
Indeed, because Stuart, we didn't go into the detail of what Stuart does every day, but we don't have enough time for that. Well, we didn't do it today, so. So the next topic is a sister city discussion, and I turn this over to the mayor.
Yeah, well, sort of, only because I asked for it to be on the agenda, but really I was doing that in response to conversations that had been suggested to me by Trustee Quesada, and with help from Corporation Council in doing research on the village's history of having sister cities. So I'll just give an intro and then I'll hand it over to you, Manny. Historically, the village has been home to a lot of immigrant groups, and two groups of people from particular communities in the past where we have established sister cities are from Alijó in Portugal and from Sassinoro in Italy. And we now have a large population that has come to us from a particular region of Ecuador. The main city there is Cuenca, and then the province around it is Azuay, and that's what Manny's going to talk to us about. But in doing the research for how we might be able to establish a sister city relationship, and city is a flexible term in a sense, how to be able to establish that sister city relationship, Stuart's research made us aware of the fact that our status as sister cities with Alijó and Sassinoro actually had an expiration date, and both of them have expired. So now is the time for us to reach out to our community members in the Portuguese and Italian community, as well as our counterparts in Alijó and Sassinoro, and suggest that we would like to renew that relationship and ask for their support in making that happen. That is what I am proposing. If people have other thoughts that for any reason we wouldn't want to renew those relationships, then that would be a good time to raise that concern. Meanwhile, there has been some increased communication with leaders in the province in Ecuador that I will let Manny share more about.
Great, thank you, Mayor. She pretty much gave brief history of what I was going to talk about. But sorry, no. So this is nothing new. At least for some of us sitting in here, we actually part of our Stuart research was there. We had established some sort of communication back in 2014 with our previous mayor, Bill Hanauer, where we sort of came up with not an idea, but more like what if we do this then? And at that time, we actually had a contact. I made contact with the mayor of Cuenca, and what it is so Cuenca is the capital of Azuay, which pretty much Azuay is more like Westchester County, if you look at it that way. And a lot of people from that region are actually here in Austin. They live here, different parts of different villages and different communities within the surrounding community. And we thought that maybe having Cuenca being the capital of Azuay, being the main region, would be something useful. And I made contact with the mayor at that time, and we established some sort of line of communication. And then 2015, when Mayor Garrity, we had more communications with them. We even Skype twice, I think. And I'm not sure what happened. The communication stopped on their end, unfortunately, and it kind of died down at that point. And having some communications early in the year with some members of the community here, it actually had a better idea where why just having Cuenca being a sister city? Why can we have a bigger portion, a bigger picture of having Azuay, which is more like Westchester County, being the sister city within Austin, and it will cover everybody that covers that within that community. I was lucky enough, and I was fortunate enough to get invited with I want to call it the county executive of Azuay. Came here. He was visiting New York at called Victoria, and I said it's an opportunity for us to meet with him. would you be available on a Sunday afternoon? And we did. It was pretty interesting to meet him. It's an interesting person, very, I want to say very, very, he has a lot of history, and I learned before a little bit and after of history, but I'm not going to get into the details. And I started communication with somewhat his the people that work with him, and I I brought up the idea of having this, and they loved the idea. That was about 2 months ago. About 2 months ago.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But 2 months ago, ever since then, I had different conversations with a couple of this. I don't want to say staff because they're friends of him that actually live here in New York. And I had 2 meetings with some of the people that actually relayed the message between us. And they are going to be having. I was actually this week. I was supposed to be talking to him. Fortunately, there are some travel matters happening right now in Ecuador, and that communication was not possible. There's some. I'm not going to give you the news, but it's pretty sure that was part of the news, talking about precedents and what they tried to do with power. I unfortunately was not able to communicate with him, so I'm hopefully try to reach out this weekend. It's a little bit things have come down in Ecuador now, so but his name is Yaku, and he's very active within the province there in Aswai. So I'm hopefully get to be able to talk to him this weekend coming up. In either case, my understanding is there is an Ecuadorian committee from Danbury, Connecticut. They are going to be having this meeting on the 26th and 27th of October, one in Long Island and one in Queens. And obviously they have their own agenda within parts of the province as well from Ecuador, but Yaku is supposed to be here. So my thinking is if we can put something together, if the board is obviously in agreements to put something together and presenting this some sort of resolution or agreement to become sister cities, I would like to present that to them and hopefully have something to be signed on the 27th of October, which is a Sunday. So that's the idea. I have talked to some of the Spanish community members in here. They're very active. They're very supportive of that concept, of that idea. So I'm looking to see if the board is in support of this.
So just let me make sure I understand the dates we're talking about. So basically it's next week's legislative session and then one more work session is what we have before that meeting. And I don't know how complicated it would be to use like Sasinoro's approach perhaps as a template for establishing this if the majority of the board is interested in moving forward with that. It does require, it's a mutual agreement. So we would be looking for the leader of Aswai to be partnering with us in this agreement.
Well, as I look at the documents for Sasinoro, there was the resolution of the Board of Trustees making the sister village designation. There was also a pledge of continued friendship and cooperation between the village of Ossining and the village of Sasinoro, also from 2009. So, but the resolution specifically talks about that the village of Ossining and the village of Sasinoro have many common qualities. Clearly, there'd have to be an understanding from the folks in Aswai
Right.
that they would want this, so that before we could basically put pen to paper.
Do we have an understanding? Have you specifically discussed the sister city potential relationship with the folks from Aswai?
Yes, and they're actually one of the things that, again, in my discussions with them was like, the whole concept, the whole idea was having Cuenca, which is the capital of Aswai,
Right.
having that being the sister city. Unfortunately, the relationships of the new mayor that was just elected, I don't have any there's no relationship because I haven't met him. I haven't even had any communications. And what I was asking of them at that time was to help me establish a line of communications with that. What they said is, we can make that happen as a SWAI, and we don't have to do this as a city of Cuenca. So my understanding is that they want to do this. They're willing to do this. My problem right now is I haven't had a direct communication with them for the past 2 weeks because of issues that have been happening in Ecuador right now. So I'm sorry.
Okay.
So on the 26th and 27th, something that I have to find out, hopefully this weekend, I'm going to call the person who's doing this whole meetings, I guess I want to call it, this conference. I have to figure it out if what happened in Ecuador this past week has affected those dates. Because it affected the whole country. It didn't just affect the region. It affected literally the whole population in there. So there's a lot of stuff happening right now that I'm not sure if these dates are solid. So I just want to make that clear. I'll have a better understanding what happens hopefully by next week.
So my question is, what is our responsibility as a sister city?
Trustee Bismarck, can I just Stuart, can you, for the public's sake and also for even just my sake of memory, can you please define what a sister city is?
Well, why don't I read from the resolution that was passed back in '09?
Perfect.
This was the designation for Sasonoro. It says, whereas the Sister Cities program was developed in 1956 to enlist hundreds of thousands of volunteer citizen diplomats in a quest for world peace, President Dwight David Eisenhower initiated the people-to-people concept to encourage Americans to communicate with people around the globe and for communities to bond together by engaging in projects that were mutually beneficial. And whereas given the diversity of ethnic origins among its population and its strong international ties, the Village of Ossining is desirous in developing closer ties with its counterparts abroad, providing an international gateway for municipal, economic, cultural, educational, medical, and governmental exchanges between the Village of Ossining and its sister cities. Then it goes on to talk about with the Village of Sasonoro. The Pledge of Friendship, which was signed at the same time, and that was a renewed one, simply meant, it says it's to focus on economic development, sustainable energy, environment, health, culture, society, education, technology, youth exchange, athletics, and sports, and to strengthen the efforts of friendship and cooperation between the two villages. I don't see exactly what that related to in terms of Sasonoro. I can tell you that with regard to, is it Alijo?
Alijo.
Alijo in Portugal, in March of 2010, the village sent over, with the compliments of the fire department, additional turnout gear, which was sent at that time. So I think that was something that was done at that time.
It was
But-
our retired gear.
So-
No, we didn't purchase it. It was
Yeah,
getting a
and-
second
and
life.
part of this whole thing, and I remember a couple years back, even Andy had, I'm not sure if it was which is the city was that, but I remember seeing a video. They're actually doing some training, some communications between them and us in relationship with water and how does that work and share services. So it's pretty interesting to see that we actually had done some of that outreach with them as well. Again, something to do with what we have in Aswai, which is a bigger, again, will be a county-wide, not just a city, which will be something different.
So, this is just a suggestion. It seems that we've been doing these things, and there've been resolutions, but then they've died in the resolutions, right? We've done certain things, but I don't know if all of us knew that we were sister cities to different communities. I'll be in support of a resolution, but what I would like to see a little more than just a resolution is, of course, something on our website, but something really explaining, what the sister city is, right? Like when people, there should be a tab. Like if we know that there's people here from a certain place, right? Like, not to say that I want to, like, if I know that Austin has a sister city in a certain part of Ecuador, I may one day decide, hey, I'm gonna go there, but try to use it as a way to again tell the fuller story of who and what we are, not just something that just I don't want to say dies once we say I, but something more than just a resolution. That would be, and I was as you guys were talking, I was like, this is one of those things where I'm like, ooh, village historian. The same way that we look at trying to make sure that we get some type of documentation for people who are being, streets that are being named. We should try to get some type of documentation, or even some of those community members who are from those areas who are active, who are supporting this. There should be something to pull these people together.
And you actually you said something interesting because Omar probably knows her better. Someone started, I think, sometime last year, trying to find out who was the first person from Giron actually here in this area. That was Veronica who started a conversation on Facebook, and she was trying to figure out who was one of the first people that came from that region to be here. So that was an interesting history. Obviously, my family was one of my uncles that moved to Tarrytown, that's just Sleepy Hollow. That's how sort of that started in my end. So I'm sure there's a lot of more history within families within Austin.
Mm.
Like here we do have places that are named, you know, on honor of our sister cities. We do have one of the sculptures of the firemen down in the waterfront because of that relationship as well. So we have done things with that.
But it's a good idea to, maybe incorporate that into, the street namings, all the historic things that we're doing. And then, because people may forget that the statue that's down in by Harbor Square is really, there's an actual, the same statue as in our sister city in Portugal. And what Sassanoro Square is,
Yeah.
is
Plaza. Mhm.
Plaza is at the top of Main Street. And, we do have, it's hard to, if we could
So
bring that out.
Right, so
I-
help
I-
tell the story of,
yeah.
the significance of these cultures in Austin.
because like in our comprehensive plan, I mean, three of us were there, but we talked about that. Like, I don't. Yeah, I'm supportive of the resolution, but I want to see more than just the resolution. If there are community members who are in support of this, because all it does is help us understand the people that we're with. I mean, listen, there's a little Bertie County committee right now here in Austin that have people who are starting to trace their stuff back from Bertie County,
Right.
Windsor, North Carolina, where I'm from. So if we're having all these different conversations, these different pockets, let's be more than just a resolution. Like it, and I'm just asking Mayor Garrity to maybe reach out to the village historian one more time to see if you guys can, meet with the people that are in support of this to do something a little more fuller, particularly as we again go into our comprehensive plan where at least which I would hope begins to tell a fuller story about who Austin is.
It's lovely. My only concern, I mean, I think that's taking this and making it relevant to the bigger picture of who we are as a community, is probably an excellent use of it. And I'm glad people are aware, at least some of us around the table, about the firefighter sculpture that's down in Henry Gordon Park, which is a replica of the original in Ali Joe. And my predecessor, Mayor Hanauer, went to Ali Joe and was so inspired by this sculpture, and then arranged to have one created here in Ossining. And when that was unveiled, anybody who was there was aware. We had some dignitaries from Ali Joe come visit us. We've got some nice gifts from them in the office back there. It's been a little while since any elected officials from Ossining have traveled to any of our sister cities, but it would be it would certainly be another opportunity to do something really big and expensive, and that's financially difficult for all of us as individuals to be able to undertake. However, it's not financially unattainable for us to use these deeper relationships that we have, and formalizing these sister city relationships should really be part of telling the rich story of who Ossining is and how that can influence all of our thoughtfulness and decision making, whether it's about comprehensive planning or just our appreciation for who we are as a community. So I like that whole discussion very much. My concern is about doing this in a way that really does justice to the intention. Going and meeting with the folks from the SWI, we may not have, because we haven't even reached out to leaders in the Italian and Portuguese community yet locally, never mind their counterparts. And it'd be nice to really do all of this together as part of that doesn't mean we can't be lining up the paperwork
No.
as
And that
possible
could
for
be-
each sister city, but
Correct. And that's something that I'm going to find out this weekend is, when when is he coming, and maybe that could be an opportunity for him to actually come here in a public setting and actually be part of this sort of like more like a small introduction, and then afterwards, then we can move forward from there. I'm not sure. Timing to me, doing the 27 is like, yeah, we had to do this about a month ago.
Yeah,
you know.
it's not like
So-
we're not closing on a house and we're
Correct.
going to lose out on the deal.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, that's not, that's not going away anytime soon. Unfortunately, this whole thing or what happened this week back in Ecuador, it kind of delays, and I would think it will delay it at some of the conversations or even the opportunity for them to be here because again, there's bigger issues going on in Ecuador right now in relates to relationships with the government and the president. So I don't know where this whole thing starts. So I have to do some of my homework this weekend as well.
So I'm hearing that maybe we're not going to have a resolution for next week, but
No. But I think I'm going to reach out to some of the members of the community and start actually engaging them and actually helping me to put something together with this whole thing. So
Okay.
it gives me an opportunity to actually do something nicer. So
I just I am definitely in support of this. I before we do anything on our part, because it seems like we have unanimous support to continue this program and to expand it. I definitely want something in writing from the municipality. So it's not the mayor, right? So making the determination which entity is actually gonna submit the letter of intent to us. We could actually show, hey, listen, we have the only party out of two parties that are agreeing to do this, because then that will then technically give us the permission to present them and also offer them back.
correct. It will be more like an agreement between the village of Austin and county executive here. That's sort of the agreement that we'll be potentially be making with if this goes through.
And just to clarify for anybody, the province of Aswai, actually the majority of Ossining residents who hail from that area, our original intent or effort was to partner with the city of Cuenca, but actually
Correct.
most people who come here live in communities
living from
outside
outside,
of Cuenca.
correct.
So, but in this province, so by doing the province,
I mean, you have regions. I mean, you have people from
Sure.
all over the region within itself. So yeah.
Right. So ideally, by the time that event rolls around, maybe we'll have something preliminarily saying our
That we can
intent
introduce
and our
that.
interest
Yeah.
in establishing this
Yeah.
relationship, because that's clearly been, I think, reflective of what happened here. Okay, so that will not be an agenda item next week, but we're going to continue having these conversations so we can move forward with, some letter of intent type of thing, hopefully by the 26th.
That will be for this is the city in Ecuador. We are going to be doing.
Meanwhile, we need to reach out to Alijao and Sasinoro so that we can get them renewed. There's another item that is not on here, but I emailed everybody a couple of times this week. But did you need to talk about something else? No. Okay. For next week, the resolution in support of New York State's legislation to have school districts incorporate into their curriculum lessons about hate symbols, specifically the swastika and a noose. If people have particular language that you'd like to be different than what was in the town's resolution that was circulated, then please get it to Stuart. Do you think we can have a resolution ready for tomorrow? Otherwise, we could just have a placeholder in the agenda and then the resolution can be added next week.
I can certainly mock it up as what was the town's, but change it into the village, and then if people want to make any changes, they're welcome to do so. And I think, Mayor, you sent around what I sent to you, which is the actual legislation.
Yes.
So if anyone wants that.
I just sent around the legislation today, but the town's resolution we sent out
Right.
earlier.
I can have that, sure.
And for the public, I will repeat this again next week, but we made reference to the 2020 budget a number of times. And I just want to remind folks about a couple of things to do with our calendar for the remainder of the year and with budgets in particular. So we have a few special meetings, and this is for everybody at the table as well as on in TV land if you aren't thinking about the rest of the Wednesdays for this year. The first Wednesday of November, the manager will be presenting her budget for 2020, her proposed 2020 budget, and she's going to. I'm not speaking out of turn, right? You did say that you would do like a presentation for the public, giving us the top lines and highlights of the budget. And that is, partly for us, but also largely for the public to have an understanding. If you just look at a budget, it's pages and pages and pages of line items. So it's very helpful.
Pages.
Yeah, it's a book. It's a book of line items and spreadsheets. So putting it into some sort of PowerPoint presentation for the public to understand what all of those pages really mean for us, it is very valuable. And so she's going to be presenting that, and the public is welcome to attend. There will actually be a public hearing on the budget that takes place later in November. So we'll have to call for that public hearing. And we can call for it anytime, but we probably want it to take place 2 weeks after that, right? It's the 20. Is it the 20th?
That'll be 2 weeks after the 6th.
Okay. All right. So right. So on the 6th, we will be meeting in the library was not available, but we'll be meeting in the community center for that November 6th meeting. So the budget presentation will be on November 6th. It's actually a legislative session, but because that's when the manager, we will probably walk in there, and none of us on the board will probably have seen the complete proposed budget. I mean, typically managers kind of working up until the last minute in the finance office and printing those up and getting those ready for us in a binder for the meeting on the 6th. And the manager will do her presentation to help us understand what all of that means and give us some framework and top line information about that at the community center. So special location for that meeting. At that meeting, we'll also call for a public hearing to take place 2 weeks later. So that anybody in the public, now once they've had 2 weeks to look at the budget, can then comment on the budget. Meanwhile, we will be having budget meetings here. And our first budget meeting takes place the day after we receive the budget. It's a full day meeting, November 7th from 9 to 5 here. And then the evening of November 12th from 6 to 9, all of these are here. 2 nights later, November 14th from 6 to 9 p.m. And then if necessary, the following week on November 19th from 6 to 9 p.m. I also want to let folks know there is not a village board meeting the night before Thanksgiving. We take off Thanksgiving Eve, so no meeting the week of Thanksgiving, which would have been November 27th, and it may be in our first week of the year. We may have said there would be, but we're not. And then that's one big jam-packed month of exciting budget meetings and updates, because then the first Wednesday in December, December 4th, the village board will be voting on what will be the adopted budget for 2020. And it will have a lot of similarities to the proposed budget, but there will inevitably always be adjustments as we, which is the point of having all of those many hours of meetings in November. The following week, we will also be in a special location again. On December 11th, we will be celebrating the village appointed boards and committee volunteers, and that'll be taking place at the library at our usual 7:30 time. We have a dozen appointed village boards and committees, and we have now reached out to the committee members, and we have invited the chairs or their designee, our designated representative, to provide us with a brief presentation of some of what's been happening in the past year, some of what they're anticipating for next year, and anything that they can ask for them to articulate any way that we can be more supportive of them and their success moving forward. We're just so grateful to have such a tremendous and tremendously enthusiastic community that serves so admirably on these committees. And we are also now in the process of ensuring that they are all fully reconstituted as necessary for January. There's some folks who are going to be peeling off, and some new folks that will be coming in, and we're really grateful to have so many applicants for that. And then the following week is the last meeting of the year, and that will be December 18th. It is a legislative session taking place at the courthouse, and we'll be opening with a special presentation honoring Marianne Roberts, who will have served. This is a question for the village historian to check out. Marianne may be the record holder, and I would say she's certainly way up there of longest serving elected official in Ossining town and or village government. She was a village trustee. She was the first woman to serve as mayor in the village of Ossining, and now for a number of years has served as the town village clerk. And I really look forward to honoring her tremendous service. And I know that she has invited her family to join us that evening, and some other folks from the community. Anybody who has served with her in the past is being invited if they would like to honor her particularly that evening. So it's an exciting end of the year. It's not just holiday season. It's an exciting budget season and end of the year wrap up for us in municipal government. Is there anything else before we adjourn to executive session? Okay. Motion to adjourn to executive session for matters of personnel involving particular persons and matters of collective bargaining.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned. We'll see you next week, just 6 days from now on Wednesday at the Birdsall Fagan Police Court facility.